Om Ajnanatimidandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Dhena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. We've come together for hearing about Krishna, which is the primary process for advancing in spiritual life. Just by sitting and hearing and then discussing the philosophy of Krishna consciousness, one gains superior intelligence and determination, which is, as we'll hear from one of the purports today, I've been going through a deep study of the 7th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And it always amazes me how there's so much there that I forget the depth of some of the chapters. I do mark the places that specifically impress me. And when I'm reading back through, I get really excited to see the places that I get to revisit. It's almost overwhelming because it's hard to assimilate all of it. And practically spiritual life is an ocean. It's described as an ocean, and there's a way in which we'll never assimilate all of it, but we can continue diving deeper and deeper into the ocean. There's no bottom to it. So we'll try today to go through some of the points in the Srimad Bhagavatam and Chaitanya Charitamrita that will specifically help us to be fortified and fortified in our devotional service, and that will also give us insight into how to continue the process with great determination. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Sarasatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraye. May I please have a Bhagavad Gita? We're reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 7, Chapter 15, Instructions for Civilized Human Beings. I have the right audience. And this is text number 43 and 44. Rago dveshascha lobhascha shukamohau bhayam madaha mano vamano suyacha maya hingsa chamatsaraha Raja pramada shunyadra Shatravas tvevam adayaha Rajastama prakritaya Sattva prakritaya kochit. Translation. In the conditioned stage, one's conceptions of life are sometimes polluted by passion and ignorance, which are exhibited by attachment, hostility, greed, lamentation, illusion, fear, madness, false prestige, insults, fault-finding, deception, envy, intolerance, passion, bewilderment, hunger, and sleep. All of these are enemies. Sometimes one's conceptions are also polluted by goodness. Are the lights up over here? Or is it kind of dim in here? Let's read it together. In the conditioned stage, one's conceptions of life are sometimes polluted by passion and ignorance, which are exhibited by attachment, hostility, greed, lamentation, illusion, fear, madness, false prestige, insults, fault-finding, deception, envy, intolerance, passion, bewilderment, hunger, and sleep. All of these are enemies. Sometimes one's conceptions are also polluted by goodness. It's a strategy that one should know one's enemy well. And Prabhupada mentions this near the end of the 3rd chapter in the Bhagavad Gita, where he talks about how kama, or lust, which is a product of association with rajogun, with the mode of passion, is the eternal enemy of the soul. And then it gets, that passion is situated in different strategic areas in the body, in the senses, in the mind. It really gets acute when it's in the intelligence, because then one starts to use one's intelligence to figure out how to become more entangled in the material world. Not that one's trying to become more entangled, but one's using one's God-given intelligence to think about how to enjoy the material world, and the result is one becomes more entangled. And so here also there's a list being given. And this is Narada Muni speaking in this chapter, and he's giving instructions on for civilized people. Thank you. And really this chapter is very important. It tells how to refine one's life so that one can take full advantage of the human situation. It's really a great opportunity. The Shastra is screaming it in many places, that you have this really unique opportunity in the human life. And you need 2 things. You need knowledge and practice. So with sufficient knowledge coming from a perfect source, and one's own impetus to practice on a regular basis, you have to have good practice. Perfect practice makes perfect. It's not that practice makes perfect, but perfect practice makes perfect, as Vince Lombardi used to say. He was a famous football coach. Very successful also. He focused on the fundamentals. Even when his championship team would win a championship, afterwards, the next season when he would start over with all these veteran players, he would say, "Gentlemen, this is a football." He would deliberately start from the beginning and say, you have to practice the fundamentals over and over again. So here we're learning about what our enemies are, and there are specific categories of enemies. So now we'll go back and read the word for word, because that can shed more light on the subtleties of each one of these. I'll say and then please repeat. Ragaha, attachment. Dveshaha, hostility. Cha, also. Lobaha, greed. Cha, also. Shoka, lamentation. Moha, illusion. Bhayam, fear. Madaha, madness. Manaha, false prestige. Avamanaha, insult. Asuya, finding fault with others. Cha, also. Maya, deception. Hingsa, envy. Cha, also. Matsaraha, intolerance. Rajaha, passion. Pramadaha, bewilderment. Shut, hunger. Nidra, sleep. Shatravaha, enemies. Tu, indeed. Evam adayaha, even other such conceptions of life. Raja prakritayaha, rajatamaha, because of the conception of passion and ignorance. Prakritayaha, causes. Sattva, because of the conception of goodness. Prakritayaha, causes. Kvachit, sometimes. Translation: in the conditioned stage, one's conceptions of life are sometimes polluted by passion and ignorance, which are exhibited by attachment, hostility, greed, lamentation, illusion, fear, madness, false prestige, insults, fault-finding, deception, envy, intolerance, passion, bewilderment, hunger, and sleep. All of these are enemies. Sometimes one's conceptions are also polluted by goodness. How many are there? Did you count them up? We want to see if we're How many? 17? That's pretty formidable. 18. Okay, here's the purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. The actual aim of life is to go back home, back to Godhead. But there are many hindrances created by the three modes of material nature. Sometimes by a combination of Rajoguna and Tamoguna, the modes of passion and ignorance, and sometimes by the mode of goodness. In the material world, even if one is a philanthropist, a nationalist, or a good man according to materialistic estimations, these conceptions of life form a hindrance to spiritual advancement. How much more of a hindrance, then, are hostility, greed, illusion, lamentation, and too much attachment to material enjoyment? To progress toward the target of Vishnu, which is our real self-interest, one must become very powerful in conquering these various hindrances or enemies. I'll read that again. To progress toward the target of Vishnu, which is our real self-interest, one must become very powerful in conquering these various hindrances or enemies. Let's read it together. To progress toward the target of Vishnu, which is our real self-interest, one must become very powerful in conquering these various hindrances or enemies. In other words, one should not be attached to being a good man or a bad man in this material world. In this material world, so-called goodness and badness are the same because they consist of the three modes of material nature. One must transcend this material nature. Even the Vedic ritualistic ceremonies consist of the three modes of material nature. Therefore, Krishna advised Arjuna, Traigunya Vishaya Veda, Nistraigunya Bhavarjuna, Nirdvanvo Nityasatvasto, Niryoga Shema Atmavan. The Vedas mainly deal with the subject of the three modes of material nature. Rise above these modes, O Arjuna, be transcendental to all of them. Be free from all dualities and from all anxieties for gain and safety, and be established in the self. Elsewhere in the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord says, Urdvam gachanti sattvasta. If one becomes a very good person, in other words, if one is in the mode of goodness, he may be elevated to the higher planetary systems. Similarly, if one is infected by Rajoguna and Tamoguna, he may remain in this world or go down to the animal kingdom. But all of these situations are hindrances on the path of spiritual salvation. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu therefore says, Brahmanda Brahmate Kon Bhagyavan Jeev Guru Krishna Prasadi Bhai Bhakti Lata Bij. If one is fortunate enough to transcend all this so-called goodness and badness and come to the platform of devotional service by the mercy of Krishna and the Guru, his life becomes successful. In this regard, one must be very bold so that he can conquer these enemies of Krishna consciousness. Not caring for the good and bad in this material world, one must boldly propagate Krishna consciousness. Now we'll do Mangalacharna. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manopishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadahmayam Dadati Swapadantikam. So the first verse, Om Ajnanatimirandasya, means that I was born into darkness and ignorance, but my spiritual master opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. And the second verse is very specifically meant for Srila Rupa Goswami, because we're Rupanugas, or followers of Rupa Goswami. And saying that he knew, Rupa Goswami specifically knew the heart of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, his innermost desire. And we're taking shelter of Rupa Goswami to inspire us on the path of devotional service. When will he give us shelter at his lotus feet? And then the next set of verses are very, they sort of cover all the different very important personalities and incarnations of the Lord. Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Yuta Padakamalam Sri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvetam Sadvatutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripasindubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. And in those prayers we've prayed to the Goswamis and to Lord Nityananda, to Srimati Radharani. We've addressed Krishna as the ocean of mercy. And we've offered our respects to all the Vaishnava devotees of the Lord, because they're the ones that carry love for Krishna in their hearts and also distribute Krishna's message all over the world. And then the Panchatattva, who give access to the process of Krishna consciousness to everyone in this age of Kali Yuga. They're most worthy of taking shelter of, because not only it's Krishna, but he appears in 5 features, and he's the most approachable and he's the most magnanimous in giving out love for Krishna. And then we chant the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, which is the pinnacle of all mantras, in which the deity is completely present, and through which we have complete access to the spiritual world if we approach in the right way. And we continuously chant with a prayerful heart in a mood of humility. And having made those prayers, we ask tonight that we can enter into this chapter of the Bhagavatam, this verse in the Bhagavatam, as it's taught by Narada Muni, and we take away specifically this mood of progress. We can make progress by becoming very powerful in conquering these various hindrances or enemies. And what a relief when one begins to feel one's own strength, that even behind closed doors one is a sadhu. Sometimes it's easier to be a sadhu or a sadhvi when everyone's watching. You can sit up a little straighter, maybe even bring a tear to your eye. That's something about when others are watching you. But what happens when you're alone? When your integrity is really in the spotlight, when nobody else is apparently watching, but you're there with Krishna, and you have the opportunity then to show to yourself that, yes, I'm taking full advantage of this. And you have, as Prabhupada points here, because you know it's your self-interest, and you become very powerful in conquering these various hindrances or enemies. And what is the first verse given in the Upadeshamrita, which is the essence of all advice about advancing in spiritual life? Rupa Goswami says, Vacho vegam manasa krodha vegam jihva vegam udarapasta vegam etan vegam yo vishaheta tira sarvamapimam pritivim sishyat. And that is that a person who's able to be very powerful in controlling the senses, the tongue, the belly, the genitals, the mind, anger, words, is actually a unique person in this world, because most people are controlled by all these things. And he says that that person actually becomes a teacher for everybody else. And that's the main qualification, that one has integrity, that one develops this power that Prabhupada's talking about in this purport to overcome the enemies that are listed. The 18 did we come up with? 18. You have to be kung fu fighting all day long to be able to take on 18 formidable enemies. I mean, you really have to. It's like, imagine if you were a kung fu fighter and you had to take on 18 at a time. And I'm sure there are plenty of kung fu movies where one person takes on at least 18 people and is able to defeat them. But they've practiced a lot to do that, take on 18 enemies. So similarly, we have all this group of enemies that we're fighting. So we have to spiritually develop these kung fu abilities to fight them off. And so Prithivim's Nashishya, Sashishya, that everyone else in the universe in the world becomes the disciple of such a person. It's natural. It's not a matter of by decree, but if somebody actually controls their senses, they develop a natural potency. When somebody develops spiritual integrity, it means that they practice the same way when they're behind closed doors as they are when they're in public and so forth. And they have this sense that the supersoul is there, and they've also developed this power through the process of devotional service, which we'll hear more about, the means to do this. That person naturally is able to help others, and others will gravitate towards such a person. And Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu asked everyone to do this. This is the project. It begins here in a very rudimentary way, learning to control the senses. Ragadvesho vimuktaistu vishayan indrayaischaran atmavasheravateyatma prasadam adhigacchati. It pleases the Lord. In other words, Krishna gives his complete mercy to those who take up this project of fighting off these enemies. They don't succumb. And it's altogether possible. We must start with that premise. Sometimes the depressed mind might say, it's not possible for me. I can't overcome it. But the logic is that because the Scripture is asking you to do it and recommending that you do it, the power is also there. Otherwise, they wouldn't bring it up if you weren't able to do it. So, a couple of points that we can start with from the purport, and that is that the actual aim of life is to go back home, back to Godhead. Are we all in agreement with that? Yes. So that really helps, because when you're able to focus on a goal, then you can overcome all kinds of obstacles, and you can learn from them. And when you know that the goal is to go back to Godhead, it's such a lofty goal that it puts all the other kinds of changes we have to go through in this world in perspective, and we're able to deal with them in a much easier way. Then Prabhupada says, although the goal is to go back to Godhead, then he says, but there are many hindrances created by the three modes of material nature. So this is helpful information to know that our hindrances are caused by these natural forces in this world called the three modes of material nature. So we should acquaint ourselves with the three modes of material nature, because they are our enemies, our hindrance in making advancement. If we don't know what we're doing, we'll be tripped up. Then he continues, sometimes by a combination of Rajoguna and Tamoguna, the modes of passion and ignorance, and sometimes by the mode of goodness. So let's look at the Bhagavad Gita 337. Here it is. Shri Bhagavanu Vacha Kama Esha Krodha Esha Rajaguna Samudbhavaha Mahashano Mahapatma Vidyanam Ihavarinam. Arjuna has just asked a question before this verse is spoken by Bhagavan, Krishna. And that is, O descendant of Vishnu, by what is one impelled to sinful acts, even unwillingly, as if engaged by force? Isn't that an interesting question? Yes. What is it that makes me do the wrong thing, engage in things that I know are wrong. And here's the answer. It's good to know. The Supreme Personality of God had said, it is lust only, Arjuna, which is born of contact with the material mode of passion and later transformed into wrath, and which is the all-devouring sinful enemy of this world. Ready for the purport? Could change your life, give you a major advantage over this enemy of lust. When a living entity comes in contact with the material creation, his eternal love for Krishna is transformed into lust in association with the mode of passion. Or in other words, the sense of love of God becomes transformed into lust as milk in contact with sour tamarind is transformed into yogurt. Then again, when lust is unsatisfied, it turns into wrath. Wrath is transformed into illusion, and illusion continues the material existence. So what's the progression? So the natural love of God gets transformed by contact with the mode of passion. Then lust. Then lust is unsatisfied. Wrath. And wrath to illusion. Right. So there's this downward spiral that takes place. And Krishna describes this also in the 2nd chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. Jayato vishayan pumsan sangasteshu pajayate. He's talking about how if you get, let's say, desirous of enjoying certain items in this material world, which is, it's a futile project, because the material world is dead matter and we're spiritual. That's the problem. And the body is already dead. I mean, people talk about the fear of dying, but the body's already dead. It's not a matter of the body doesn't die. It's already dead. It's just that we step out of it at a certain time. Ukramantam stitam vapi bunchanan vagunan vitam. Vimudanana paschanti paschanti jnana chakshusha. And if you're ignorant, you don't know what's going on. It becomes a fearful situation. So we're incompatible with matter. We can't enjoy it, but we try. Or let me put it this way. Take that back. I'm incompatible with matter, but I try to enjoy the material nature, and that causes this downward spiral. I become attached to it, I become frustrated by it, and I fall into illusion. So this is a mechanical process. It's a psychological state that happens over and over again when I'm not properly fortified with knowledge and in practice of devotional service. And this is good information to have for those who are on their path back to Godhead. So Prabhupada continues. Then again, when lust is unsatisfied, it turns into wrath. Wrath is transformed into illusion, and illusion continues the material existence. Therefore, lust is the greatest enemy of the living entity. And it is lust only which induces the pure living entity to remain entangled in the material world. Wrath is the manifestation of the mode of ignorance. These modes exhibit themselves as wrath and other corollaries. If, therefore, the mode of passion, instead of being degraded into the mode of ignorance, is elevated to the mode of goodness by the prescribed method of living and acting, then one can be saved from the degradation of wrath by spiritual attachment. Altogether optimistic, isn't it? There's an arc in this first paragraph in which Srila Prabhupada is telling us about the way in which one becomes degraded and the reason that one becomes degraded. It's contact with the material nature, and specifically the mode of passion and ignorance. But there's a way, there's a process to become extricated from that situation, which is given very specifically in the Bhakti scriptures. So we're optimistic. Now, if there's any kids under 12 years of age in the building, they have to be accompanied by an adult at all times. It's one of the rules of the temple. The Supreme Personality of God had expanded himself into many for his ever-increasing spiritual bliss. And the living entities are parts and parcels of this spiritual bliss. They also have partial independence, but by misuse of their independence, when the service attitude is transformed into the propensity for sense enjoyment, they come under the sway of lusts. This material creation is created by the Lord to give facility to the conditioned souls to fulfill these lustful propensities, and when completely baffled by prolonged lustful activities, the living entity begins to inquire about their real position. This inquiry is the beginning of the Vedanta Sutras, wherein it is said, Atato Brahma Jignasa, one should inquire into the Supreme. And the Supreme is defined in Srimad Bhagavatam as Janmad Yasya Yataha, Yaton Vayad Itaratascha, or the origin of everything is the Supreme Brahman. Therefore, the origin of lust is also in the Supreme. If, therefore, lust is transformed into love for the Supreme, or transformed into Krishna consciousness, or in other words, desiring everything for Krishna, then both lust and wrath can be spiritualized. Hanuman, the great servitor of Lord Ram, exhibited his wrath by burning the golden city of Ravana, but by doing so, he became the greatest devotee of the Lord. Here also, in Bhagavad Gita, the Lord induces Arjuna to engage his wrath upon his enemies for the satisfaction of the Lord. Therefore, lust and wrath, when they are employed in Krishna consciousness, become our friends instead of our enemies. There's a portion of the second half of this purport in which Prabhupada gives us this Sambandha Gyan, or clear knowledge of who we are, and he explains how the Supreme Personality of Godhead expands himself, Eko Bahusham. The one becomes many for the purpose of enjoyment. And we're the same quality as the Lord, but in quantity, we're different. And because of our smallness, we can become overwhelmed by the material nature. And also, he mentions that the eternal occupation of the living entity is to serve God. And when that gets perverted into a spirit of enjoyment, then one becomes captured by the material modes of material nature. So this helps in the process of fortification, or from the original purport we read tonight, of developing this strength. You have to have a clear understanding of what's taking place in this world, what my situation is here, and what I'm up against as far as the various enemies. What's the cause of my illusion in the material world? How to reverse engineer the process, basically. Because we're understanding where we came from and what our existential position is, our eternal situation. And knowing all these things, one can be very much helped through the intelligence. And when observing the world, one can observe it and not become entangled by seeing Janmad Yasayataha. It's an emanation from Krishna. The example of the standing at a grocery store line and the person in front of you drops a $100 bill, and then you have a few choices. One choice is just to leave it there and not get involved. That's not very complete. The next is you could pick it up and put it in your pocket. And somebody sent me a video the other day. These social experiments are going on all over the place, people do nowadays with cameras and everything, where someone would drop a wallet, and then they'd see if people would pick it up. I don't know if they're just selectively showing all the ones with people picking it up and keeping it. It's rather discouraging. But so many people pick it up and just keep it. And it's actually painful to watch when somebody takes something that obviously belonged to somebody else and keeps it. It's painful. And then the third thing is someone could tap the person on the shoulder, pick it up, hand it to them, say, this is yours. So a similar way, if I know who everything belongs to and what my relationship is with it, and I understand the implications of stealing it or trying to keep it for myself, or I understand the great benefit of giving it back to the original owner, then I can do the right thing. So Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, or excuse me, in the Ishopanishad it is said, Isavasamidang sarvam yatkincha jagatyam jagat tena tyaktena bhunjita magrita kastisviddanam. Everything animate or inanimate within the universe is controlled and owned by the Lord. One should therefore accept only those things necessary for himself, which are set aside as his quota, and one should not accept other things, knowing well to whom they belong. When I have that clear understanding that everything belongs to Krishna, and I know to who to give it to, and not to try to enjoy it for myself, I don't become implicated. So this transformation can take place either I can become degraded or I can become purified by understanding properly how to engage myself and how to engage everything that I have around me. And finally, Prabhupada emphasizes how the process of devotional service is superior because one can engage even these propensities like anger in the service of Krishna. Of course, this should not be taken advantage of because there's a way in which one could lose one's anger and then say, yeah, that was for Krishna. And that's not good. Better to control anger unless it's really necessary in Krishna's service, which is pretty rare circumstances. So I read that verse because in the beginning of this purport that we're reading tonight from 7:15, 43 through 44, Srila Prabhupada said that the actual aim of life is to go back home, back to Godhead, but there are many hindrances created by the three modes of material nature, sometimes by a combination of Rajagun and Tamogun, the modes of passion and ignorance, and sometimes by the mode of goodness. We hear a lot of Shastra tonight. I'm going to read a couple more verses that might help orient us in this, and then we'll take some reflections, okay? So the next one I want to look at is 14:10. Just understand a little bit about how the modes of material nature work. Because we've understood already, or we've heard anyway, that that's what we're up against. And we look at 4:10, I'll say, please repeat. Rajas tamash chabhi puya sattvam bhavati bharata rajasatvam tamaschaiva tamak sattvam rajastata. Translation is, sometimes the mode of goodness becomes prominent, defeating the modes of passion and ignorance, O son of Bharata. Sometimes the mode of passion defeats goodness and ignorance, and at other times ignorance defeats goodness and passion. In this way, there's always competition for supremacy. So there's a constant tension and battle going on between these three modes of material nature. There's not a safe position in the material world, in other words. You may cultivate the mode of goodness, and then the mode of passion might defeat that later. If you look at pictures of people from the past, you'll notice that there's a devastating effect on material nature. Right now, we're all sitting together, and everything looks fairly all right. But if you start looking at old pictures of your classmates from school and high school, college, or whatever, you might start noticing, like, you know, certain people were killed, certain people are in jail. I mean, there's unlimited things that can happen because there's a constant struggle for supremacy, or not a struggle, but there's a shifting of these modes of material nature, and they become prominent at different times. And the person who is now the king can end up in the next life as a cobbler. There's no guarantee. One thinks that I'm the richest man in the world. I own 16 golf courses, I heard today. Certain person. And billions of dollars and so forth. And next life you may be the person who cleans up the golf course, or a little squirrel who runs across it. That's how how drastically the modes of material nature and how powerful they are. So one has to be aware of the fact that we're dealing with a non-stable situation in this material world, and you can't rest in any one position. You're going to be churned by these modes of material nature. Here's the purport. Are you ready? But only a little bit ready? Completely ready, right? Okay, purport. When the mode of passion is prominent, the modes of goodness and ignorance are defeated. When the mode of goodness is prominent, passion and ignorance are defeated. And when the mode of ignorance is prominent, passion and goodness are defeated. This competition is always going on. Therefore, one who is actually intent on advancing in Krishna consciousness has to transcend these three modes. The prominence of some certain mode of nature is manifested in one's dealings, listen to this, in his activities, in eating, etc. The prominence of some certain mode of nature is manifested in one's, say it, in his, and that's DAE. Dealings, activities, and eating. Those are three, I mean, there are many, it says, he says, etc. But you can see how the modes are manifested in various people, the way they speak, and the way they deal with other people, and a lot what they eat. And Krishna goes into this science in the Bhagavad Gita. It's like, what's the person eat? Oh, they're in the mode of passion or ignorance. What's the, or they're in the mode of goodness and so forth. There's a science to this, to these modes of material nature. One should know the science very well in order to overcome the enemy. So we're getting this knowledge. All this will be explained in later chapters. But if one wants, he can develop by practice the mode of goodness, and thus defeat the modes of ignorance and passion. How do you do it? Say it aloud, please. Practice. You have to have two things, knowledge and practice. By knowledge and practice, one can defeat. And let's, everyone can maybe move up just a little bit. Welcome to all the sadhus who just walked in. When sadhus start coming in, you know something's going right in your life. Hare Krishna. Thanks for coming. Great to see you all. Yeah, move in close. Isn't it nice to move in close? It's better, isn't it? Okay, time's going fast. We'll try to keep going. The whole life's going fast, isn't it? It's just, okay, here we go. This is really important and really powerful. Let's read it again. The prominence of some certain mode of nature is manifested in one's dealings, in his activities, in eating, etc. All this will be explained in later chapters. But if one wants, he can develop by practice the mode of goodness and thus defeat the modes of ignorance and passion. By what? Practice. That's our prerogative. And then this is the exciting point of human life. Practice is available. You can decide a new course, but you have to have knowledge. So these two things, knowledge, then practice. So you get the knowledge, and then incrementally you have to apply the practice. And then you can actually overcome the influence of these three modes of material nature. And that's what's being pointed out here. Pretty exciting, right? Yes or yes? Yes. Thank you. So, one can similarly develop the mode of passion and defeat goodness and ignorance. How do you do that? It's a similar... of course, you may do it unwittingly and just fall into it because of bad association. But, if you deliberately wanted to become full of passion and ignorance, all you'd have to do is associate with people in the mode of passion and ignorance. And it is guaranteed. Purusha prakritisto hi bhunkte prakriti jangunam karanam gunasangosya sarasad yoni janmasu. The cause is there. The modes of material nature are extremely powerful, and we pick up from our association in this material world those various modes of material nature by association, by sangha. So you have to be really careful about sangha, and don't deliberately cultivate passion and ignorance because it won't help you. It'll hinder your progress in going back to Godhead. or one can develop the mode of ignorance. I mean, it's just so funny. Prabhupada even puts it in the purport. It's like, it's just showing all the way through free will. You have the choice. You know, you can advance, or you can go to lower modes of material nature. You can cultivate these if you wish. Who would want to do that? Although there are these three modes of material nature, if one is determined, he can be blessed by the mode of goodness. And by transcending the mode of goodness, he can be situated in pure goodness, which is called Vasudev's state, a state in which one can understand the science of God. By the manifestation of particular activities, it can be understood in what mode of nature one is situated. What a golden purport and verse, isn't it? It lays the platform for us to either advance or decline. And of course, knowing both sides is important. Vidyam chayas tad vedo bayam saha avidyayam ratum tirtva vidyayam ratum ashnate. Sri Upanishad says, you have to know the nature of the material and spiritual world, of ignorance and knowledge, side by side. And that's what's being given in this purport. A view of what happens on either side, in ignorance or the process of elevation and knowledge. And if you know those side by side, then you can transcend death and move into the higher realms where you belong. You can go where you belong. So that's more evidence about the modes of material nature, all given in a concentrated way. And I'm going to read one more, 14:18. For your edification, just so this whole idea of choice and the effects of the modes of material nature is clearly in our mind, because it's part of the strategy that Prabhupada's giving in the purport about how to deliberately cultivate Krishna consciousness and fortify oneself. So this verse, I'll say, please repeat, Urdvam gachanti sattvastha Madhyetishtanti rajasaha Chakanya gunavrittista Adogachanti tamasaha. Those situated in the mode of goodness gradually go upward to the higher planets. Those in the mode of passion live on the earthly planets, and those in the abominable mode of ignorance go down to the hellish worlds. Throughout the Bhagavad Gita, we get this sense that Krishna's laying out the scene for us and telling us what our choices are. As Sri Dayananda Maharaj likes to say, Krishna's not a religious fanatic. He's not condemning anyone, he's simply showing us the various options that we have. This is a parallel, or it resembles the verse, Yanti devavata devam pitrin yanti pratirvata bhutani yanti bhuteja yanti mam yajinopi mam, where Krishna says, you can go wherever you like. You can determine where you go by where you put your energy, by where you put your focus in life. You can go to higher planetary systems, you could go to lower planetary systems, depends who you worship. And as we said before, this word worship, it comes from the original root, the word worth, something of value. And then when you put ship on the end, it makes it a noun. So worth, it really, you can say it as worthship. What's it worth to you? What do you value in life? Where do you place your values? Where do you place your energy, therefore? You're going to go there. That's where you're going to end up going. And so now he's telling what the effects are if you take these various pills. You take the pill in the mode of goodness, passion, or ignorance, this is what's going to happen. So, purport. We read the translation, right? In this verse, the results of actions in the three modes of nature are more explicitly set forth. Powerful, isn't that? I'll read it again. In this verse, the results of actions in the three modes of nature are more explicitly set forth. What valuable information, right? Because once that's there within our intelligence, then we know what the choices are very clearly. And then we begin to discriminate between the different kinds of activities that we do in this world, because we're cultivating and we're moving towards the goal. There is an upper planetary system consisting of the heavenly planets where everyone is highly elevated. According to the degree of development of the mode of goodness, the living entity can be transferred to various planets in this system. The highest planet is Satyaloka, or Brahmaloka, where the prime person of the universe, Lord Brahma, resides. We have seen already that we can hardly calculate the wondrous condition of life in Brahmaloka. But the highest condition of life, the mode of goodness, can bring us to this. The mode of passion is mixed. It is in the middle between the modes of goodness and ignorance. A person is not always pure, but even if he should be purely in the mode of passion, he will simply remain on this earth as a king or a rich man. But because there are mixtures, one can also go down. People on this earth, in the mode of passion or ignorance, cannot forcibly approach the higher planets by machine. In the mode of passion, there is also the chance of becoming mad in the next life. Ouch. The lowest quality, the mode of ignorance, is described here as abominable. Jaganya gunadrittista. This is the abominable mode of ignorance. The result of developing ignorance is very, very risky. What is it? It is the lowest quality in material nature. Beneath the human level, there are 8 million species of life, birds, beasts, reptiles, trees, etc. And according to the development of the mode of ignorance, people are brought down to these abominable conditions. The word tamasa is very significant here. Tamasa indicates those who stay continuously in the mode of ignorance without rising to a higher mode. Their future is very dark. There is an opportunity for men in the modes of ignorance and passion to be elevated to the mode of goodness, and that system is called Krishna consciousness. But one who does not take advantage of this opportunity will certainly continue in the lower modes. So again, just hearing about the fact that there is an opportunity piques the interest of the human brain, because there's a way in which humans are after goals. And when the goal is clearly defined and the consequences of various types of actions are also given to a person, he or she can make valuable choices, or the right choices, which result in auspiciousness and progress and so forth. So we're trying to lay that groundwork, and this purport that we started with in the Bhagavatam 7th canto, again, I'll just read the first part of it so we're oriented towards the verses I read in the Bhagavad Gita. Then we're going to take some reflections before I move on. The actual aim of life is to go back home, back to Godhead, but there are many hindrances created by the three modes of material nature. Sometimes by a combination of Rajagun and Tamagun, the mode of passion and ignorance, the modes of passion and ignorance, and sometimes by the mode of goodness. In the material world, even if one is a philanthropist, a nationalist, or a good man, according to materialistic estimations, these conceptions of life form a hindrance to spiritual advancement. How much more of a hindrance, then, are hostility, greed, illusion, lamentation, and too much attachment to material enjoyment? To progress toward the target of Vishnu, which is our real interest, one must become very powerful in conquering these various hindrances or enemies. Remember, we repeated that 3 times? We said it 3 times? Let's say it one more time. To progress toward the target of Vishnu, which is our real interest, one must become very powerful in conquering these very... Say it again, because now it's highlighted. Yeah, when I read that sentence, it really struck me. It just how important it is to get an early start and to remain steadily on the path of devotional service, so that one has the wherewithal to deal with the giant pull that comes from the modes of material nature. So now we'll take some reflections. Anything that you've heard so far that's stuck in your mind that's useful that you can take with you.
This sentence I was remembering. Lord Shri Krishna, he says in chapter 7 of Bhagavad Gita that this divine energy of mind consisting of the three modes of material nature is very difficult to overcome. But if one surrenders, he can cross over it. So I was just...
I'm glad you brought that up. It's a relief to know that there's a shortcut to the whole process. Daivahieshu gunamayi mama maya duratyaya mameva ye prapadyante mayam etam turantite. It's very difficult to overcome the influence of the three modes of material nature. Sometimes we say impossible. But if one surrenders to Krishna, one can easily cross beyond it. Next question is, how do I surrender? Where do I sign up? You know, there's a little table outside, and they have a little chit, and you can sign up there and say, okay, I surrender. I want to be in that line. Get in line and sign up for it, figure it out. And that's really what Krishna says at the end of Bhagavad Gita. It says, surrender. Surrender to me, and I'll deal with the whole situation. Very nice. Thank you for bringing that up. Okay, who is next? Kameshwari, and then we're coming over here to Parama.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. The point that stuck to my mind is that there is always one mode that is prominent, either goodness, passion, or ignorance. And one will act in such a way according to the mode of that particular mode unless one gains knowledge and practices under the shelter of the scriptures. And I was remembering some point when we go out book distribution and we try to show Bhagavatam, then some people, they say, I just moved into this house, I need some time to settle, I have some situation in hand, once I take care, I will come back to you. And we try to explain that the situation is like growing up children. So every age of the child has its own challenges. When they are young, we have to feed them, take care of them. When they grow up, they can eat by themselves, but then we are very concerned about their education. When they grow up, then we concern about the fees for their education, like that. The life has, you know, the situations are one after another. You cannot really say that I'll become stable and then I'll take care of the spiritual life. And that's what I was thinking, that that's what I actually came to my mind, that unless we actually gain knowledge and practice Krishna consciousness, then there is no escape.
That's a nice point. That there's a way in which people think that, you know, as soon as I get ready, then I'll take the spiritual life. But there's no stable point in material life, and the Shastras advise, therefore, that one should take it up immediately. Komara acharat pragno dharmam bhagavatam iha. That from very early age, one should take it up, or as soon as one understands the importance of it, one should give one's full attention as soon as possible. And it's always interesting. You mentioned that situation. It happens so often when we go out to distribute books, where we'll meet somebody and speak to them for a few minutes, and even they may become slightly enlivened about the prospect of some spiritual knowledge. And then so many things can happen. One is somebody else can come along and influence them. Had this happen, it's a heartbreaking experience sometimes, like a husband and wife combination sometimes. This used to happen at O'Hare Airport a lot. We spent a lot of time in that airport distributing books, and one of the hallways we were in front of United and American Airlines, the restrooms are on either side, and sometimes somebody would be waiting for a spouse, and then they'd show them a book and they'd become interested in looking at it. Then the spouse comes out of the restaurant and says, "Come on, let's go, you don't want that." So they say, "You don't want that." It's like, no, he really does. And it's heartbreaking to see them be pulled away. And then the other thing is sometimes people say, "Yeah, I'll come back." And it always think like, yeah, you'll probably come back, but you know, it's really hard once you walk away. The law of diminishing intention, even in the practice of accounting, which I studied for some time in college, there's this law of, you know, when there's debts, you have to collect them right away, because even the best people in the world, because of the influence of time and the modes of material nature, their intention diminishes. So when you have the opportunity for spiritual life, you just take it right away. I used to tell that story to people. In fact, there was two young men on Haight-Ashbury when I was distributing books one day, and they said, yeah, we'll come back. And they were a little high, which is not unusual in Haight-Ashbury. And so I told them, okay, that's fine, come back, but let me just tell you this one story. And they go, yeah, what? And I said, so there was a bumblebee, and he flew into a beautiful grove where there was a pond and lotus flowers. And the bee settled into one of the lotus flowers and was enjoying the smell. And then an elephant came along. A sage came along, and the sage said, and they start to listen as I'm telling the details, because as again, they were saying they were a little high. And it became interesting to them. I said, so the bee was in the lotus flower, and then a sage came along and said, you should get out, because the flower is going to close in the night, and you'll be trapped in there. And then the bee said, don't worry, I figured it out. When it opens in the morning, I'll fly away. And the sage said, beware, you should beware, it's very dangerous. So the bee stayed in, flower closed, an elephant came through at night and started scooping up all the lotus flowers and eating them. And the bee was consumed within the belly of the elephant. And so I told them the story, and they go, okay, we'll take it. But there's a way in which one has perspective of what can happen. It's very difficult. It's easy to think, things will just go on, but the modes of material nature shift. Here in California, where we get earthquakes, it's one of the kind of natural disasters that is really kind of, I don't know what the adjective is. It's really interesting because there's no forewarning. There's no way of predicting an earthquake, except for the fact that there will be an earthquake at some point when you live on a fault line. But you don't know exactly when it's going to come. And you can be making plans and thinking about how things are going to go in the world, and all of a sudden this huge jolt of energy comes, and it makes your house feel like insignificant. I'm thinking, this is significant, my bank balance is significant, everything, but then it just shakes it to the core suddenly with no warning. And the modes of material nature are very heavy, they move like that, and people think, I'll get steady here. Shukadeva Goswami, Deha patra kalatradesu apasaini susatsapi tesham pramoto nidhanam pashanapina pashyati, said, people see that the material world is unstable, but still they try to take shelter of the body, of their family members, of their bank balance. But he said, these are fallible soldiers. It's good to have that ingrained, to understand that I shouldn't put my faith in an unstable situation. Also, Krishna says to Arjuna, to Uddhava, 11th canto Srimad Bhagavatam, if I can remember the verse, Shruti pratyaksham aiti yam. What's the second line? Anumanam chatushpadam. What's the third line? Pramaneshva afanasthanad vikalpatsa virajite. Thank you. I told you it's good when sadhus come in. This verse, this is Krishna speaking to Uddhava, and he said you should use 4 kinds of evidence: the shruti, hearing, pratyaksha, your direct experience, itiyam, traditional wisdom, anuman, logical deduction, to understand that this material world is not stable. It's not a place you get to stay. It's not a place that has any stable platform, and therefore, vikalpatsa virajite, you should develop a little sense of detachment from the material world. Don't become fully invested in it. Thank you very much. Who was next? Yes.
The verse 14.10 struck me very well. It was talking about the competition between the modes of nature, and the other purports tell that they are our enemies in this world. And a picture came to my mind where I'm being strangled by three enemies at the same time, who are competing within themselves on how to strangle me. So it was very insightful, and that the next thought that came to my mind was that it means I have to be very focused on my practice in devotional life. And
I like how you've personified these enemies, and it's done in the Shastra in various ways. Shankaracharya, in one of his poems, some of his prayers to Nrsingadev, writes about how the highwaymen of my senses. I mean, just that word, highwaymen. That's one of the most rude awakenings you can have. You're driving along in your car. That always seems like a fairly safe place, but it's one of the most dangerous places. It's more dangerous than terrorist attacks and driving in your car. But when you get held up at gunpoint, and pulled off the road and asked to give away all your stuff suddenly, it's a rude awakening, isn't it? So he says that these enemies are like that. They take me as like highwaymen and they throw me into a pit, and there I am stuck. And there are many other ways in which the whole predicament of material life is described in these personified forms about, one running away from wild animals, hanging over a blind well, at the same time being attacked by bees and so forth. It was somebody on the phone trying to get in.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Shruti, please go ahead.
I believe some of my basics is always the Prabhupada. That part of that sentence in the purport that you were quoting about the enemies, very strongly trying to overcome the enemies, the hindrances of Krishna consciousness.
Yes.
I was trying to find that. Was that in the same section of the 14th chapter of the Gita? Was that?
Say it again. Which particular line were you looking for?
Just after you read about, you could be mad in the mode of, become mad in the mode of passion, and then in the mode of ignorance is very risky. And then you read something about, you said a sentence really jumped out at you.
Yeah, that's from 7th Canto, 15th chapter, verses 43 through 44. About halfway down through the first paragraph. To progress toward the target of Vishnu, which is our real self-interest, one must become very powerful in conquering these various hindrances or enemies.
Okay, all right. So down at the very end of that purport, 7:15:45, I just wanted to add that we must, it says, Prabhupada says, we must therefore conquer the enemies of Krishna consciousness with the strength received from Balaram.
Yes, that's in 45. This whole chapter really goes into how to take shelter of Vaishnavas. And actually, we're running out of time fast, but that's where I wanted to go. I got two more. Maybe we can stay up late tonight and keep going. We'll see what happens. Thank you, Shruti
Right,
Prabhu. I'll bring up that point. I'll make sure I touch on that because it's such a nice point.
Yasya prasada bhagavad prasada. Hare Krishna.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. Radha Kripa.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Maharaj, while discussing the three modes, I start feeling that goodness is not good. It sounds good, but it is not good. Because you could be defeated by ignorance at any moment, and what is the goodness? It doesn't mean anything. So that thought came into my mind.
Yeah, don't hang around. And Prabhupada wrote in the purport, Traigunya Vishaya Veda, Nistraigunya Bhavarjana, Nirdvanvo Nitya Sattvasto, Yoga Shema Atmavan. Krishna is recommending, don't hang around anywhere in the material world, even in the upper echelons of the mode of goodness, because from there, it's like along the coast of California. There's this phenomena of sleeper waves. Some of you are nodding your head. Okay, here's what happens. It's very disconcerting, to say the least. People go out on the headlands. It's so beautiful. You can see whales, and oftentimes it's a romantic, walk. Lovers just got married or whatever, and then they go out onto the headlands, and they're looking at the beautiful ocean and waves, and you can go a little bit further up to the very edge and just watching. And then every once in a while, a huge wave comes along. I'm not talking about a tidal wave that washes away whole cities. They're called sleeper waves. They just sneak up on you, and it's about 5 times bigger than all the other waves, and it jumps over, and it grabs people, just pulls them right in. And that's it. The whole thing's finished. And when you hang around, the mode of passion can jump out and grab you, the mode of ignorance, all of these things can unceremoniously come up in your life. So the main point is that you have to come to the transcendental platform. Safety is there. Samashitaye parapalavaplavam mahaparam punya yasho mararehe bhavam buddhirvatsa param 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 yadvipadam natesham. Srimad Bhagavatam recommends, don't take shelter anywhere here. There's no safe step anywhere in the material world, no safe position, but take shelter completely of Krishna. Over and over again, from moment to moment again. While we're in this material situation, it's precarious at every step. So constantly take shelter of Krishna. That's the sum and substance of what we're talking about, of the process as Kameshwari. So, you brought up, Shamalangi brought up about this surrender to Krishna. Nice point. Mukaravind. And then let's, some text coming in. We have a few texts coming in. Okay.
Thank you, Maharaj. It's a wonderful topic. So I'm always interested when we give books to out, like how people really change their life. And I really experimented sometimes. So one of the lady I gave, who was my bus, in the same bus he used to come. And then after some time I met her again and I asked, okay, what you liked in the book? Then she told, yeah, I'm reading it. And then the point that you brought today, that then one thing I can say after reading the book is that it's not like the God that is mentioned is that he's a fanatic. He has given options. He's not like...
She said that.
She said that. I was just amazed to hear from her that how she's saying that, yeah, that's exactly what Krishna is giving options.
It's kind of a relief, because there's a way in which in some religious traditions, people begin with the wrong premise. And whatever ideas they come to after that are erroneous and scary, actually. I mean, the premise that some people come to start with is that God is a monster. Because who else would, in one minuscule little life, if you happen to join the wrong church, for instance, would burn you in hell forever after that, and not hear your cries that, you know, even you were trying to reach God, but you just did it in a different way than somebody else. I mean, these are ludicrous understandings of the Supreme, and you have to start with the right premise. And it's so evident when you read the Bhakti scriptures, like the Bhagavad Gita, especially available to people. When they read it, they get this feeling of relief that here's some commonsensical information given from a higher source, and they can take advantage of it, right?
That's what I feel. She was so relieved that, yeah, this is totally, and I told you, yeah, this is the essence of the whole scripture, that if you understand Krishna has given us options, different options, and this depends on what you mentioned in today's class, how Krishna is not fanatic God. That
yeah, is. Nice. Okay, from the internet. And we welcome everyone from the internet. Please turn to your left and say, Hari Bol. Hari Bol. Welcome. Thank you for joining us in this international community of hearing and chanting.
There's a question and a comment. I'll start with the comment first. This is from Rasaprada Prabhu.
Rasaprada Prabhu.
He's online. Hare Krishna, my dear Gurudev. Please accept my sincere and heartfelt obeisances and dandavats. All glories to Srila Prabhupada and to you as well. The best way to conquer all this attachment is to accept that we were born without anything, and the day we die, we are not taking anything with us either. It's a matter of being clear that everything is illusion, even though we are touching or living it. In the long run, it is still the same, it's illusion. That will give a better understanding that our mission is spiritual and not material.
Thank you.
And then there's a question from Nandini Radha Mataji from Los Angeles. Hare Krishna Prabhu, which of our 5 senses is our worst enemy, and why is it?
Well, I mean, any one of the senses can act up and distract us. But the Shastra in several places points to the tongue. Specifically, a prayer we sing frequently, Sharira Vijaja, which gives joy to my heart. Jodendriya Tahikal. There's a Bhaktivinoda Thakur follows basically what the Padma Purana says, Atashi Krishnanamadi nabhaved grayamindriye sevamukhi jivhajo swayameva spuratyada. That's start with the tongue. And also the Vacho Vegam Manasakrota Vegam verse that we cited earlier, starts with the tongue as a gateway. and so forth. And in the 11th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, it is mentioned that one may conquer all the other senses, but the tongue isn't conquered, then one is considered to have not conquered the senses. Start with the tongue. So there's a whole concept of yoga of the tongue. The yoga is the rudder. It's the place where one starts. And there's so much to do. There's speech. Controlling one's speech is a huge, huge project to take up in one's life. And then being careful about how one eats and tastes and so forth. So yeah, start with the tongue. How's that? Okay. What else?
No, Maharaj, I'm just going to add something. I was not going to bring up this earlier, but while I was driving, I was listening to the lecture, and I really liked the point where you said that we should not succumb to the forces of anger, but instead connect with the Supreme to do that. And just now you said, Atha Shri Krishna Namadi Nabhayut Grahamindire. So I've noticed that when Mukharvinda gets angry or feels angry, he immediately starts reciting Bhagavad Gita verses, you know.
That's how you do it, huh?
That's because
so
of bad association.
So if you hear him reciting verses, you know what's going on. Okay, let me touch on a few more things. Not to be greedy here, but there's a few more things that we could bring up. Let's say the progress toward the target of Vishnu, which is our real interest. To progress toward the target of Vishnu, which is our real self-interest, one must become very powerful in conquering these various hindrances or enemies. So let's look at 257 in the Bhagavad Gita. Is everyone all right? You never go broke taking a profit, as they say in Wall Street. Yes sarvatrana bishnehas tat prapya shubhashubham nabinandati nadveshti tasya prajna pratishtita. In the material world, one who is unaffected by whatever good or evil he may obtain, neither praising it nor despising it, is firmly fixed in perfect knowledge. And this goes to this idea of not even being attached to the motive of goodness. Shubha, shubha. Something auspicious, inauspicious, it's all the same. It's manodharma. It's a concoction of the mind. Prabhupada used to give this very graphic example of wet stool, dry stool. In India, you might encounter this more frequently because people, especially in the villages, will use the field to answer the call of nature, and then there may be evidence of that later in the day, and someone may say, well, this is good and that's bad. This one's dry, this one's not dry yet. But it's all the same contaminating substance that comes from the body. So Shubha, Ashubha, there's a way in which the auspicious, inauspicious in the material world is a concoction. It's all inauspicious. Purport, there is always some upheaval in the material world which may be good or evil. One who is not agitated by such material upheavals, who is unaffected by good and evil, is to be understood to be fixed in Krishna consciousness. As long as one is in the material world, there's always the possibility of good and evil, because this world is full of duality. But one who is fixed in Krishna consciousness is not affected by good and evil, because he is simply concerned with Krishna, who is all good, absolute. Such consciousness in Krishna situates one in a perfect transcendental position called, technically, samadhi. So, when one attaches oneself to Krishna through attaching oneself to a Vaishnav and attaching oneself to Krishna's instructions, the instructions of one's spiritual master, then it's like holding onto a rope. One can go past all these various situations of life. It's not that they go away. It's not that there won't be good and bad things that happen in this life. There may appear to be a great increase in our material happiness through some windfall. Material wealth might come suddenly. And also there may be great calamity in one's life. All these things are the vicissitudes of the material nature, and they definitely have some effect, because we live in a bidimensional universe where we're a combination of matter and spirit. We're a spirit soul living within this material nature. So it's not that one should falsely expect to not be touched at all by these things. But if one has grabbed onto these instructions and is living one's life with the goal to go back to Godhead, one can process whatever happens to one, the good or the bad, and keep the balance in Krishna, keep one's balance in Krishna consciousness, and keep progressing back home, back to Godhead. I know I'm reciting a lot of things here, but it's kind of fun, right? 9:28, let's look at that. See how much we can cram in just a short amount of time. Shastra cram. Prabhupada said, cram Bhagavad Gita. Did you know he said that? Did you ever cram anything for a test? Yes. So cram Bhagavad Gita. Okay, here, 9:28. Is that what I said? Yes. Okay, here it is. Shubha Shubha Palarevam Mukshase Karma Bandhanahi Sannyasa Yoga Yuktatma Vimukto Mam Upaishasi. Again, we hear the Shubha Ashubha, auspicious, inauspicious, right? In this way, you will be freed from the bondage to work and its auspicious and inauspicious results. With your mind fixed on me in this principle of renunciation, you will be liberated and come to me. Previous verse, just for context, Krishna said, whatever you do, whatever you eat, whatever you offer, give away, as well as whatever austerities you perform, do them for me. Stay connected to me in all your activities in life. And here's the purport. One who acts in Krishna consciousness under superior direction is called yukta. Just that sentence alone you can live off for the rest of your life. One who acts in Krishna consciousness under superior direction is called yukta. The technical term is yukta vairagya. This is further explained by Rupa Goswami as follows. Anasaktasya vishayan yatarham upayunjitaha Nirbandha Krishna Sambandhe Yuktam Vairagyam Uchyate. Rupa Goswami says that as long as we are in this material world, we have to act. We cannot cease acting. Therefore, if actions are performed and the fruits are given to Krishna, then that is called Yukta Vairagya. Actually situated in renunciation, such activities clear the mirror of the mind. And as the actor gradually makes progress in spiritual realization, he becomes completely surrendered to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, at the end, he becomes liberated, and this liberation is also specified. By this liberation, he does not become one with the Brahmajyoti, but rather enters into the planet of the Supreme Lord. It is clearly mentioned here, Mam Upaishasi. He comes to me, back home, back to Godhead. There are 5 different stages of liberation, and here it is specified that the devotee who has always lived his lifetime here under the direction of the Supreme Lord, as stated, has evolved to the point where he can, after quitting this body, go back to Godhead and engage directly in the association of the Supreme Lord. Anyone who has no interest but to dedicate his life to the service of the Lord is actually a sannyasi. Such a person always thinks of himself as an eternal servant, dependent on the supreme will of the Lord. As such, whatever he does it for the benefit of the Lord. Whatever action he performs it as a service to the Lord. He does not give serious attention to the fruit of activities or prescribed duties mentioned in the Vedas. For ordinary persons, it is obligatory to execute the prescribed duties mentioned in the Vedas, but although a pure devotee who is completely engaged in the service of the Lord may sometimes appear to go against the prescribed Vedic duties, actually it is not so. It is said, therefore, by Vaishnava authorities that even the most intelligent person cannot understand the plans and activities of a pure devotee. The exact words are, Tar Vakya Kriya Mudra Igne Na Bhujai. A person who is thus always engaged in the service of the Lord, or is always thinking and planning of how to serve the Lord, is to be considered completely liberated at present, and in the future he is going back home, back to Godhead, and that's guaranteed. He is above all materialistic criticism, just as Krishna is above all criticism. Again, he's always thinking and planning how to serve the Lord. This matches well with this statement Prabhupada makes repeatedly in his teachings, that one should think about how to spread the Krishna consciousness movement all over the world. Entrepreneurs generally get absorbed in thinking all the time. They barely have a second. If you call a wealthy, well, maybe not wealthy, but busy, a successful entrepreneur, and you ask for a little bit of time, if you ask for 5 minutes, that's a lot. Can I have 5 minutes? You want 5 minutes? With him, you want 5 minutes? We'll see what we can do. Because he's busy. And in the same way, the spiritual entrepreneurialism that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu brought, this spreading of Krishna consciousness movement all over the world, if one engages oneself in all the activities that it takes to engineer a takeover of the material world by spreading Krishna consciousness profusely, and in all the aspects of life, one can be absorbed in this kind of activity all the time. Use up one's vital life energies for the sake of spreading Krishna consciousness, and while at the same time continuously hearing and chanting. It's perfect balance. And one can achieve this position of transcendence through this very process that we've been given. That is, hearing and chanting from the literary canon that we've been given, which is practically inexhaustible. You won't come to the end of the particular books that we've been provided with by Srila Prabhupada. If you read night and day, still you won't come to the end of it. And at the same time then using the balance of your energy to think about how to expand it around the world in various types of services. Perfect balance. And one can come above the three modes of material nature by that process, by this balanced process of Krishna consciousness. Bali Mardan Prabhu.
So I was just thinking the same in line. Prabhupada mentioned about the 4 categories of people, like lazy intelligent, busy intelligent, busy fool, lazy fool. So somebody asked, who is the worst? He said that busy fool is the worst because they are fools and they're busy means they're destroying everything. And who is at least most advanced out of that to recipient of Krishna consciousness? Lazy intelligent. At least he's intelligent, not doing anything, which is good. Because if anybody does, then they will definitely destroy. That's the...
So what was your case for why the lazy intelligent was the best?
Lazy intelligent, which Prabhupada mentions, because he is intelligent, because anything in this world, material world you do, it will be ultimately inauspicious. Any adventure, any kind of endeavor you perform. So the fools has no idea what he has, the intelligence. They are completely busy, means they are really not
that
doing
part
anything.
I got.
But the lazy intelligent...
Yes, you know when somebody's a fool and then they have some impetus to act, then you really got to watch out. I mean, see the monkeys, at least the rhesus monkeys, the white monkeys in Vrindavan, they're the langur monkeys. They're very passive. If you give them a banana, they'll go, thank you very much. But the rhesus monkeys, I saw a lady once walking out of Radhakund with a big, huge bag of bananas. I think she intended it to, you know, kind of good-heartedly feed them to the monkeys and stuff. And these 2 big bull monkeys came approaching her and she said, here, take one of these. I said, no, whole thing, now drop it. And then they go off and wreck stuff. When they were building the Govardhan temple, reconstructing the temple there, every time they'd build something new, those monkeys would specifically come in and break it. I mean, they would target it. You know, they're foolish but active at the same time. Yes, Manjula Kanta. Here comes the microphone. You don't have to move an inch. It's coming right back to you. Within 15 seconds or less, or your money back from this presentation tonight. There's 2 microphones, okay.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. When we get angry, it's an emotion that floods us, you know. And I don't know, as a mom, as a wife, I seem to get there very often. I was wondering, every time we get upset, we are reminded to tolerate. But my question is, you know, what is the meaning of tolerate? The emotions don't just stop. They do flow through us, like everything else flows. Do we just not act on it? Because a lot of times when I'm very upset, nothing helps. At least we get smarter over time. The food doesn't help. The watching something, shopping something, doing something actually doesn't help. So we learn to chant, or connect to something that we know will help if we just hold on. So I find that chanting really helps. It helped better than it did before because I'm more connected to it over time. There's no immediate elixir that is going to get me out of my predicament. But my question is, what is the exact meaning of tolerance? Do I watch it flow? Is that how I tolerate pain, anger, frustration, whatever it is in my life?
Really depends on the situation, because some situations require that you respond, because you may not be able to let it go. You may have responsibility to do something about a particular, but at the same time you have to maintain your existential perspective of what's really going on. I mean, the Shastra says to forgive living entities requires a little perspective. One thing is that the universe is working uniformly, and therefore we should understand that whatever people are doing, they're perpetrators or they're offenders and so forth, they're in their own cycle, and they're also going to get the exact result that comes from that cycle. And if I buy into it, then I simply get carried away by their particular cycle and implicated also. So maintaining a little bit of existential perspective that, why implicate myself? It's being taken care of. There's a higher power taking care of everything that goes on here. And also learning to forgive other living entities for transgressions is a good practice. I do it on the road all the time. Kanasnir Kula. I have a mantra when people transgress on the road, which is an easy place to get angry because it's so impersonal. You don't know who's in the other car. You just assume that it's a big blob driving, but there's actually a person in there. You probably like them. It might even be your mom or something, and cuts you off. If you knew it was your mom, you wouldn't get angry, right? So it just shows it's a matter of kind of impersonality or ignorance or something. But I always say I forgive you. It may be hard to say sometimes because you think no, I forgive you, because I don't want to carry it around, and let things take their own course. At the same time, even as you respond to certain situations dutifully, at the same time you can do what you have to do, and you may even have to exhibit some emotion while you do it. But internally, you should also maintain your equilibrium, spiritual equilibrium, and see what's going on. There's certain situations when you can't avoid certain emotions. For instance, when maybe your mother dies, your father dies, or something like that. I've had this experience because both of my parents passed away, and I always wondered how I would deal with it, and then I got the opportunity to see. And it's kind of interesting. I was reading something about how emotional trauma can also, you can feel it physically. I remember right after my mom passed away, and I was on a walk, and one of my neighbors pulled up or something and said, "How you doing?" I said, "I feel like somebody just beat me up." It's like somebody really pummeled you or something like that. And that's how I felt. I feel like somebody just beat the stuffing out of me. And there wasn't something I could avoid by philosophy or anything like that, but I did process the whole thing, obviously in an ongoing way while she was leaving, and afterwards, and still even now. But we're in this bi-dimensional situation, so you have to be very strong in Krishna consciousness, as Prabhupada was mentioning here. You have to have that spiritual power because of your investment in your spiritual practice. And then when all the changes come along in life and even emotions arise, You may even observe them. Even they get the best of you, you can still observe that the process that's going on and say, oh, just see what happened. I succumbed to my lower self. And just in that observation, you can right yourself. Balance isn't a matter of being completely still, it's a matter of knowing how to pull back to the center. Apuryamanam achala pratishtam samudramapa pravishanti yadvat tavat yavat kama pravishanti sarve sa shantamapnotina kama kami. Sorry about that. Krishna describes how the ocean is taking in so many rivers and at the same time not being disturbed. So in a similar way, one's mental system is encountering a lot of input from our past conditioning, from the modes of material nature and so forth. It may even agitate us, but at the same time we can rise above it by having perspective.
What shloka number, Maharaj, is that?
That's the penultimate shloka in the second chapter, right? Second to the last? Third to the last? 2.70? Pundits? Sadhus? Huh? Apuryamanam machala pratishtam. It's 2.70. No? Okay, I'll look it up. Hold on. Oh, all right. Okay, let's see. Your verse is, yep, 270. Correct. Well, we only have 3 minutes left. Isn't that a shame? I hate this. Okay. Hey, listen to this. Norman Vincent Peale, top 10 positive pearls of wisdom. I just saw a few things that related. He wrote about the power of positive thinking. I'm not going to read them all because they're not all completely relevant, especially today's talk. But these couple, you may be surprised if you just step up and face your obstacles, he said. And sometimes the obstacles seem insurmountable, but take a shot. Why not? Go up against them, see what you can do. Take all the wisdom from the Bhagavad Gita, take help from the superior source of your mentors and guardians, and try to face your obstacles. See if you can overcome them. He said, stand up to your obstacles and do something about them. You will find that they haven't half the strength you think they have. And oftentimes you find this in urges. An urge says, I'm going to be here forever, so you better succumb. But if you wait 2 seconds and you say, I'm going the other way, just in that one flash, when you say, I'm not going to succumb, all of a sudden it disappears. Of course, if it's an addiction, it may stick around a little longer. But that takes a little more work. Then he says, understand to overcome. Understanding can overcome any situation, however mysterious or insurmountable it may appear to be. So this has to do with Sambandha Gyan, which we cultivated a little bit of tonight. And lastly, expect to get what you expect. So we should have firm determination that the goal is at hand. If we simply take shelter of Krishna, as he recommends in the Bhagavad Gita, and then we can rise above this seemingly insurmountable situation and come to this point of power of controlling the senses and being able to dedicate our consciousness willingly, without any disturbance, to the service of Krishna. Then, Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, Jeev Krishna Das e Bishwas Kole Tor Tukonai. Then all your misery goes away because you understand you're properly situated. Om Tat Sat. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman, hey, Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman.